By the time you hear this, I'll be dead. I lived in a family of 5. We were constantly moving to ghetto houses every 2 years, which I found odd. All of which were small and barely had any room, so growing up was a bit challenging, especially with my 2 brothers. They were both 7 years old, while I was 13, so you can imagine they were the golden pairs. They both would always whine to get their way and throw the worst tantrums you will ever witness to get it. However, sometimes my parents, who cherished and spoiled them beyond comprehension, sometimes got fed up with their behavior, which is how this whole thing started. Before the whole thing started, we ended up moving once again. This time, the house seemed like a mansion compared to our old neighborhood, and the neighborhood could be Beverly Hills for all I could comprehend. So me and family settled in after some time, and everything was good. I was at the peak of my life until I started getting insomnia again. My parents took me to a doctor, but I could tell he hated me. He wasn't all playful like he would to a kid, which I was grateful he wasn't, but he wouldn't even ask me a simple, "How are you?" or even a "Hey." Just looked at me with a blank face, resisting the urge to frown. After a couple of weeks of meeting with my doctor, my mom came up to me with something in her hand. She told me, "Honey, I finally got your medication from Dr. Waynon." She showed me the pills I will be taking, except I found this odd because I saw the exact same bottle of pills on the doctor's desk, except the pills inside had a different color and even a different shape. While I did find this odd, I ignored it, popped the pill, and went back to playing my game. I was actually dozing off, and I eventually fell asleep. But what I experienced during the sleep makes me wish I just kept my former ongoing insomnia. I was in a nightmare, but this one was different from any other nightmare I had. I was in my living room, watching television like I usually was. Except I saw that my backyard door was open. I got up to close it, and I went back down. Except when I looked back, it was still open, so I tried to close it again. When I went back to the couch, it was still open. In fact, it looked like I never even budged it from how it originally was. I gave up, thinking the door was broken, so I went to tell my parents, but they weren't there. I thought that my parents were busy somewhere with my brothers, so I thought nothing of it and continued watching television. Until I saw a shadow walk past the backyard. My heart pounded harder than thunder. I immediately ran upstairs for my parents, but then I remembered that they weren't here. When I realized that I wanted to die, I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and dialed 911, but for some reason, the call was literally declined. It took another pair of balls to grow out to check the yard, and nothing was there. But I heard a door closed. When I looked back, the backyard door was closed and locked. I ran to the fence door to escape, but it was jammed. This is it. I'm dead, I thought to myself. I heard a voice. I was scared from my hair to my toenails. "This is how you open it. Watch closely," it said. The backyard door opened, and 1 minute later, an entity with a black body and what appeared to a distorted human mask for a head. What to age? Before I could finish what I was going to say, I felt a pressure in my stomach. I looked down, and the demon was staring into my eyes as he penetrates his hand into my stomach even further. I vomit blood, and he punches me in my hip. I'm sent flying as a loud crack is all that's heard. I thought I was gonna be sent to a different state until I hit my fence. The demon smiles and lunges towards me. I put my arms up to shield my head. However, I then feel intense sharp pressure in the back of my head. He wasn't trying to attack me. He was distracting me from his partner. Before I have time to look back, a third demon hops the fence and somehow gouges out my eyes in a flash. I was in too much pain to even care about the demons until I realized something. I can't see anymore. All I can do is hear the laughter of the demons and then unbearable pain all through my body. They were eating my flesh. I hear my parents, but instead of them screaming, they get closer and eventually also chew on my body. Soon after, I wake up with my heart pounding so much I thought I was having a heart attack. I tried informing my parents, but all they did was say it was a nightmare. I told them how I was afraid to sleep and told me to take another one of those pills. I did, however. After the trauma of the nightmare, they took me to the doctor. The doctor who gave me the medication, Dr. Waynon, was visibly confused and irritated. "You want to sleep? Then take these pills." I was shocked. My parents didn't mind this. I told him about the nightmare, and he smiled. "What happened during the nightmare?" I teared up as I told him the story. He hugged me and said, "Don't worry. Keep taking the pills, and they should go away." I then popped one of the pills, and soon we were ready to leave. However, as he weirdly hugs me one last time, a bottle of pills fall out. The top of the bottle has a sign that is familiar to a biohazard sign. I know one of these. My grandpa used to be a doctor. Told me those same bottles of pills with the biohazard sign were used in POW camps to dispose of useless men. When I looked further into the bottle, it had the same color and size as the ones I took. I then looked to his desk to see the bottle of pills that are in his insomnia section. I clicked to a realization. He was giving me pills to give a heart attack and kill me in my sleep. It was too late. I had already swallowed one. I immediately knew. This one would for sure kill me. It's 4 hours until my bedtime, and I'm making the best of the 4 hours. 4 hours. I found a priest's diary from 1910. The contents of it haunt me to this day. I've been working for a cleaning company for a couple of years now, and you see some weird stuff, but nothing compares to what happened at the old Fisher house. The memory of that day still crawls under my skin, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever shake the feeling that something is watching me, something dark. It started like any other job. Mrs. Fisher had passed away a few weeks ago, and her family wanted the place cleaned up so they could sell it. The house was big, a dusty old thing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow up the sunlight. It was one of those places that immediately felt wrong the moment you stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rot and neglect. Every step I took on the creaky wooden floors echoed through the empty rooms, the only other sound being the wind outside rattling the broken windows. I started in the living room, wiping down furniture and sweeping the floor, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. It was in one of the upstairs bedrooms where I found it, a small leather-bound diary tucked under a loose floorboard. The diary looked ancient, the pages yellowed and brittle, the leather cracked from age. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just some old family keepsake. But when I opened it, something changed in the air around me. The first page was written in shaky, old-fashioned handwriting, dated July 12th, 1910. It was signed by a priest named Father Augustine. His words were strange, like he was documenting something terrible that had happened. In nomen patris et filii et spiritus sancti. I write this to recount the horrors that befell the village of St. Cuthbert, for my soul will never rest until the truth is known. I kept reading, feeling a shiver crawl up my spine. It began with the children. Their laughter twisted into screams, and their eyes turned black as night. One by one, they fell to the curse, speaking in tongues, writhing like serpents upon the ground. At first, we thought it was a sickness, but it was not of this world. It was the work of the devil himself. The room suddenly felt colder, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me. But the house was empty. I was alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to keep reading. I was called to the village when the first child died. Her body twisted in unnatural ways, her mouth open in a silent scream. The villagers whispered of demons, of something unholy that had come to our land. I did not believe them. I was a man of God. I was a fool. The first exorcism failed. Deus in adiutorium meum intend. The words of the ritual did nothing. The child laughed a laugh that was not her own. She spoke to me in the voice of 1,000 serpents, mocking God, mocking my faith. And then she died, her body turning cold and stiff in my arms. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a creeping sense of dread that was getting harder to ignore. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know more. I opened the diary again, flipping through the pages. The priest's handwriting grew more frantic as the entries went on, his Latin prayers scattered throughout the text, as if he were desperately trying to cling to his faith. I have seen the face of evil. It wears the skin of the innocent, but its soul is black. The demon is no longer in one body. It moves through the village like a plague, corrupting, consuming. I tried to perform another exorcism tonight. It went wrong, so very wrong. Daemons me circumdederant. The demon was stronger than I could have imagined. It spoke my name. It knew me. It taunted me, saying it had been waiting for me. I could feel its presence in the room, crawling beneath my skin, filling the air with its stench. Suddenly, I heard a soft creak behind me. I jumped, the diary slipping from my hands and falling to the floor. I whipped around, my heart in my throat, but the room was still empty. The shadows seemed to shift though, moving in ways that didn't feel right. It was like something was here with me. I picked up the diary again, my hands shaking. I wanted to stop reading, but something was pulling me in, like the words had a power of their own. I flipped to the last entry, dated October 31st, 1910. The village is lost. The demon has claimed them all. Men, women, children, it moves through them like a plague, leaving only death and madness in its wake. I hear its voice in my sleep now. It whispers to me, calls to me. I know what I must do. This is no longer a battle of faith. This is survival. I will confront it tonight. Fiat voluntas tua. If these are my last words, let it be known that I fought. Though I fear, I fight in vain. The last line was written in shaky, barely legible script. I hear it now. It is coming for me. As soon as I finished reading, the wind outside picked up, howling against the windows. The house groaned, the floorboards creaking as if something heavy was moving through the halls. My breath came in short, panicked bursts, and every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then, the whispers started. They were soft at first, like the wind slipping through cracks in the walls, but they grew louder, more insistent. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in a language that made my skin crawl. The same language that Father Augustine had written in Daemons advenient. The room seemed to darken, the shadows stretching across the walls, twisting and writhing like something alive. My heart pounded in my chest, and I backed toward the door, clutching the diary like it was my only lifeline. But then I saw it. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light, a figure stood. It was tall, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones, its eyes black and empty. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and malevolent. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I was frozen in place, unable to look away from the thing in the corner. Then it smiled. The smile stretched impossibly wide, splitting its face in half, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. And then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp that seemed to echo inside my head. Fiat voluntas tua. I bolted. I ran faster than I've ever run before. Down the stairs, through the darkened halls, out the front door. I didn't stop until I was in my car, slamming the door behind me and fumbling for the keys. The house loomed in the rearview mirror as I sped away, its dark windows staring after me like eyes. I never went back to the Fisher house. I quit my job the next day, moved to a new town, trying to forget everything I'd read in that diary. But I can't shake the feeling that something followed me. The whispers still come at night, creeping into the edges of my dreams, filling my mind with dark, ancient words I don't understand. And right now, as I'm writing this, I feel like I'm being watched. Like there's something standing in the corner of the room, smiling.
I'm a police officer that quit his job after a paranormal experience. I'm not a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts or demons until now. Yeah, stuff happens that can't be explained. But I just want you all to know that it took more than a couple of flying spoons or a door opening on its own to scare me out of my job. Since the department didn't find any reason to keep this police report confidential, I will now detail you everything I can on what happened on the scariest night of my life. We had just received word from dispatch to check out a noise complaint in a small neighborhood whose name I will not disclose for their privacy. It was me and my partner. Let's call him Paul and I'll go by Mike. We arrived sometime after midnight. The street is dead. Everyone is sound asleep at this point. We park our patrol car in front of the aforementioned house and exit the vehicle. We knock on the door and let our presence known. Police, is anyone home? A little girl, 8 to 10 in appearance, opens the door and peeks through the gap. Hey, I crouch to make myself less intimidating. Is your parent or guardian home? She shakes her head. My first thought was that she probably had the TV a little too high and woke up the neighbors. But before I could tell her to stay inside and lock the doors then part, I heard the sound of crashing silverware coming from what I presumed would be the kitchen. The entire house was nearly pitch black. The girl answering the door and shaking her head let me know she was alone, which makes whoever made that noise an intruder as far as it concerns me. I asked the girl to step outside and turned to Paul. Paul, why don't you give her one of those lollipops you like to suck on when you're nervous? Paul gave me a cold stare as the girl giggled. They went to go wait by the car as I slowly pushed the door all the way open. Police. If there is anyone in this house, please let yourself be known. Without a warrant, I had no right to enter the building. I tried my best to spot whoever made the noise, but it is too dark to see. Just any sign of a threat, and I would be justified to search the house. But nothing. I left the door open and headed back towards Paul and the girl. Hey again, I don't think we introduced ourselves. I'm Officer Mike. This is my partner Paul. If I may ask, what is your name? Maribel. That's a pretty name. So Maribel. Again, if I may ask, where's your family? As soon as I had finished my sentence, the television in the living room turned on, volume fully up. Me and Paul quickly turned in surprise and could see the television playing static from outside. We put Maribel in the back seat of the patrol car for her safety, as no civilians were allowed in the front seats. We then, against our better judgment, enter the house. We tried every switch in the house, but no lights came on. While wandering the house cautiously, I would catch a person standing in the mirrors. I thought it was Paul, but every time I looked behind me, Paul was nowhere to be found. As I returned to the front door along with Paul, we both jumped as running footsteps echoed down the hall. We detached our firearms and aimed it at the source. The footsteps got louder and got closer, but no one ever appeared physically. Lamps, chairs, and other stuff started getting thrown around by an invisible force as the footsteps reached us ... We sprinted out of the house and waited by the front yard. The footsteps seemed to stop, followed by the police siren that went off. I ran to the car and silenced the siren. I looked back at Paul, who seemed shook. "You all right, Paul?" He takes a lollipop out of its package and puts it in his mouth. "Yep." I opened the rear door and checked up on Maribel. "You okay?" She nodded her head, so I walked back to Paul. "I don't know what to make of this," he said. "Yeah, me neither." "No, seriously. Ignore the running invisible man that knocked everything down for a second. All the family photos, pictures on the wall." He points at Maribel. "She's not in any of them. So what are you thinking?" The footsteps led outside. Then the siren goes off. There's a million buttons in that car. What are the chances? "Paul, are you trying to tell me that Maribel is haunted? How do you explain what we just saw?" "I'm sure there's an explanation." The TV turns on when we take Maribel outside, prompting us to check it out. Someone or something shows up in the mirrors but ducks away. I remember wanting to shut him up. Not because he wasn't making any sense, but because he was. "I know you've seen it. It was prowling around." Then it runs outside and gets in the car. Tries all the buttons. I think a ghost is trying to get to the girl. I just stood there, not sure what to say, until Paul decided to start walking back towards the house. "Paul, what are you doing?" "It only shows up in the mirrors." That's how we find it. I followed him inside and watched as he takes a book from the counter and breaks the nearest mirror. "What's the matter with you? That's someone's property." He takes a shard and hands another to me. It's not every day you get to arrest a ghost. We aimed our flashlights all over the house, waiting for something to appear in the broken glass. I recall praying to God Almighty to not let anything show up, but it did. I panicked as it swung its red bony arm at my back. It ripped right through my uniform, causing me to fall forward. I dropped the glass, which broke into smaller chunks. It continued clawing at my shirt and flesh, but stopped when Paul opened fire. I heard it screech, fading as Paul helped me up. We both then hurried back outside to find Maribel missing from the back seat. It was difficult explaining what happened to the department without sounding like nut jobs. The police cameras who we were betting on to prove our stories had shut off the moment we entered the house. The thing, whatever it was, must have turned them off while we were unaware. The only part of our story that our police captain took seriously was the girl, Maribel. The captain brought up a missing person report and asked us if this was the girl we saw. It was. It's been just a few days since I gave up the badge to save whatever little pride I could spare. I just ask to whoever hears this and to whomever it may reach. The next time a door opens on its own or things move by themselves in your home, check the mirrors.